Thank you very much for this introduction. And now that you all know our secrets, we're here today to speak about immigration, about the future of immigration. Is this going to make our life better? Is it going to make it more difficult? We have a panel of very different immigration experiences. To begin with Stuart, who covers 20 countries in East Bloc and Central Europe, and there's Sabine, who stands for Switzerland, which is a very weird European country. It's a little bit of Europe, a little bit not. It is Schengen. Why? So and then, of course, there's Kasia, who is, I think, our expert, because you cover Europe, Russia, Middle East, and what else, and all that in immigration. So if there are things today that she doesn't really present, I'm sure you can fire all your questions at her. So I'll let you take off with the program for
Absolutely.
this.
Thank you so much, and please, no difficult questions. So we'll start immigration and the future in mobility. What we will try to address here, we want to try to look at what may impact immigration within Europe. As we are all based in these regions, a majority of us at least, we would like to know where is it going, what may change in the immigration law, will it be more difficult, will it be easier? And there has been many initiatives across many European countries which worked or didn't work out quite well. So we will try to address those and try to comment on how this works. So I would like to start with the politics, as it was mentioned earlier, and economy. How does labor market protection impact the rules and regulations which are implemented in your country? What would you think is the maintenance of the immigration balance, so having foreigners versus locals? Are your countries looking at the migration risk zones? Is this something to look out for? And especially when we deliver immigration services, is this something that we consider on a regular basis, that certain nationalities will be having preferential treatment, the others will not? Highly qualified specialists, perhaps the hottest topic in Europe, where every country starts focusing on this migration group and setting rules and regulations for this purpose. Are there desired sectors in your countries which may attract more labor for particular groups of particular specialities? And another one, as the country is developing, are the countries providing any form of encouragement to bring those investments? But when the investments come into the country, the obvious next step is that they have to bring the specialists who will start the business, who will manage the project, who will bring the local labor. But in order to bring the local labor, there must be someone to guide them through what they need to do. So perhaps I would throw it to my colleagues to maybe start, or the audience, if you have any examples that you would like to share from this sphere of politics and economy.
I'll wait for the microphone. It's a good start. I like people who are ready to ask a question.
I'll already introduce Isamar van Hilten from the peer group. Hi. Hello, thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to answer all the difficult questions.
Pleasure.
There is one thing that really concerns me, and it is Spain. We don't work in Spain, but we find that Spain is the loophole in Europe. If you invest for, say, 100,000 euros, you buy a house in Spain, you get your residency permit, meaning you get access to the entire European market. We don't know who can afford 100,000 euros, but we think it's not all credible people. So that means a lot of people that we maybe would prefer not to have in our European market are entering through this loophole because there's encouragement of investments. What do you think we all can do about that?
I think, or Spain, we do not have a particular Spain person in the panel, but we have a European person, so Kasia.
Yes, so I do believe those will be only my thoughts, not necessarily like that everybody will believe, and I perhaps also will ask my colleagues what do they think about that. In general, that's on my next slide, so you are going ahead of the game already. We do see the increase in change of types of permits within Europe. So more and more countries are introducing the investment type of permits, giving the opportunity for those who have a certain amount of money and are happy to either buy the property or invest into the government projects, government programs, social security programs. They are able to, as you mentioned, gain the access to the market and settle within the European Union, which of course opens the door to all the other countries. I presume if they were able to collect this amount of money, which is quite sizable, so in some of the countries it will be perhaps like 350,000 euros, in some of the countries it's 500,000 euros, in some of the countries it's almost going up to 1 million. So those are the people who have some financial standing that they can afford. I don't know how other people could collect this type of money to invest, so perhaps I am not that concerned that there will be a huge population of unwanted migrants into this region, but may happen, of course. And I do believe if it happens, the governments will be reviewing the procedures accordingly to put appropriate restrictions. So it all comes down to first implement, observe, measure, and then correct as it moves along. But perhaps you have...
Yeah, what I've seen, obviously, I'm headquartered in Hungary, so that's the place where I tend to know most of what's going on. Hungary had if you give us 300,000 euros, we'll give you an instant long-term residency and fast track to citizenship. However, there was at least the same requirement for criminal background checks and so on and so forth. But there is an irony there that there should be a uniform policy across the EU of saying, okay, we're going to limit immigration inbound unless you've got a certain amount of cash. Obviously, we saw this in Cyprus. Cyprus was censured by I believe it was Cyprus. I apologize if it wasn't. It was an island, Malta, Cyprus, that was censured by the EU for simply giving passports away too easily for too much, for an amount of cash. I'm not familiar with the situation in Spain, but from Inzama's comments, it sounds similar. What I've seen is that there are background checks. If you have a criminal record, you're not going to get in. Beyond that, how you establish that amount of cash in your back pocket that you can put 300,000 into a government bond or whatever. Again, I couldn't possibly comment.
So that's a very good example of politics and your second point on the immigration balance. So first there's an initiative and then it is corrected.
Yes, absolutely. So I do believe perhaps we have quite good examples here also in the audience on how the government implemented the law, and then as there's a pressure from, I would say, organizations, and perhaps if I may ask those who have had this experience in their countries where the government recognized, for example, there is an investment in the country and there is a pressure from the group. I don't want to give away the entire story, perhaps if I may.
Hello, my name is Claire. I'm from Spain. I'm an immigration lawyer.
Perfect.
It's not 100,000. The initial was 180 was the plan, but eventually the government managed to raise it actually to 500,000. You can buy it between two people, but the investment has to be 500,000. So, they are thinking a little bit about Europe, but still it has flexibilized. There are highly qualified specialists with the new law that came out in 2013. So, yes. But whether there's going to be sort of something more in Europe, do you think they'll maybe unify the system a bit more? Or is it just going to be, it's not as flexible, you know, like the tarjeta azul, which is meant to be the blue card for the European Union. Do you think that will ever work?
We'll come to that in a minute, right?
We will come to that.
Shall we move to the different kinds of cards and different approaches?
I think like it will be a good topic for the next slide, and we are touching base on the blue cards. But like, I think like it's interesting for the audience to hear about the initiatives which are in Europe for. Okay, we had the speaker here for Czech Republic. How Czech Republic has resolved the problems with the processes.
Yeah, in Czech Republic, and that's mainly addressing the last the item, encouraging investment. That is not so much private investment, but so not if somebody buys a house, they get a residence permit, but more investments by companies. And they recognize in Czech Republic the immigration process is quite, it takes quite a lot of time and it's quite complex. And Czech government recognized that for companies willing to invest in setting up, they needed to bring in experts and management. And they started 2 years ago 2 pilot projects where it is possible to get a fast track approval of the permits. It's still pilot projects that is supposed to be implemented in the law this year, which is probably not going to happen, but the pilot projects will continue. But that's a nice example of where the government recognized that very strict immigration procedures might actually hinder investment in the country, so they started those pilot projects to see how that works. It's evaluated, and if it works, it will be incorporated in the law.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Denmark has a great example as well of fast-track procedure. And I see a person from Denmark, but...
Hang on.
Question here from Denmark.
Yeah, Michelle.
What happens when you let them
Michelle is
loose
out
with
there.
the questions? You'll get to the second point. But everything that you need to know is in the room. That's what's interesting, and that was fascinating. Somebody asked a question immediately. We have a lawyer, not even in billable hours, giving the answer.
Thank you, Kasia. I'm Michelle from Copenhagen Relocations, and yes, in Denmark, they have recently implemented a fast track. Because there is we're a small population, 5.5 million, they need qualified labor to come in. And who's driving that? It's the multinationals, the large companies that are asking for this. We go to, 5 years ago, they started doing immigration forums where after the government changed and made a special section under the employment ministry to take care of highly skilled work permits. And they're very intent on attracting and retaining highly skilled talent to Denmark. And this fast track is fantastic because you can arrive and start working. You have to visit the immigration authority first, just to say who you are and make sure you are who you say you are. And then you can start working. There are a few hitches. It's new, so there's a few hiccups they have to take care of, but we're very excited about it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to point out by this that when we look at this, we have politics and economy, and everybody hears about politics, so everybody hears about the news, but nobody sees what happens behind the scenes, how the economy really impacts the regulation on immigration rules. And this is seen and more, I would say, by the governments, and it is recognized that if you do want to attract good investments, if you do want to attract good business into your country, you have to do something to help them to get appropriate permits. They will not abolish it completely because they still do want to have control over the migrant population in the countries, but they will make sure that if there is an interest in the particular sectors, they will make it easier. And as the sectors are putting the pressure as well on the government, they start recognizing it. So from one side, like politics, it is an interesting topic perhaps for the politicians to have on the table, especially when you see that there's a tension, there's not enough jobs, there's a big unemployment in the country. Those are very useful topics for, I would say, playing with emotions of people. But what's behind, it's always the economy that will impact what the procedures are. Please.
Your you're bang on in terms of that tension between the politics and the economy. I'm from Canada, and we've had tremendous amount of reform to our immigration programs over the last 3 years. And the one thing that has driven it has been public opinion about employers bringing in low-cost workers, foreign workers, to drive down domestic wages. And business has to step up to the table and reverse that discussion to show that we need these highly skilled workers. And that's a challenge for the business community.
Yes,
I don't think that is just confined to North America or to Canada in this case, but I think it is a global issue for us because of the disruption that we have in the world of work today, where we've got where we're displacing low-skilled people and we're creating more highly skilled jobs.
Absolutely, and you are completely right with your comments. There has to be a balance, and I do believe like nothing stands still. That's something I am a big believer of. So every government is revising their processes and procedures fairly regularly. That's why so many changes in immigration. That's why we are doing the job we are doing, because who would follow all those changes? So they do run their statistics. They do have the records that they are looking at, but they also recognize what are also important elements of the country development. So you do have to take into the account the economy, because if you don't, like how is this country going to develop? So we can talk about the popular topics for the public, and perhaps UK is the hottest in those conversations. I'm not sure who is here from UK, but I'm sure everybody would be able to comment on it. And me being Polish, living in UK, it's even more so, and hearing about my nationality overtaking many jobs, it's even more interesting from that perspective. So I do recognize that those are very important topics, but I do believe as well that the governments are looking for those measures to balance on immigration and the economy, and also like the covering the wages and making sure that there is certain balance in place as well. So that's perhaps.
Kasia, I was only just going to add to that I mean, we were talking on the phone, discussing what we would talk about and how we could just push everything onto you as the audience.
Have you noticed?
Q&A started early, but with the Czech Republic is very progressive for our region, but 2 points I wanted to make. One is that Poland is now seeing a situation where they have labor shortages, and they're now having to get labor in for agriculture, and because such a huge number of people have left. Hungary's suffering massively in the medical field. Somebody posted recently on Facebook a list of the staff of a certain department of a hospital in the UK, and the entire staff all had Slavic or Hungarian names, and so therefore the health service in Hungary, those that are left behind, are probably maybe not the best staff, and there are shortages. The other point I wanted to make was that Czech Republic might be progressive in the sense of recognizing the need for certain highly skilled labor from outside the European Union and the EEA. A lot of the other countries in our region are certainly not that progressive and haven't seen this challenge yet. And for example, I'll take Indian citizens as an example. We're seeing a lot of IT specialists coming in with unique knowledge that you can't get in the EU. There's a reason why they're willing to fly these employees halfway around the globe to be in Hungary or whichever country it is. They have specialist knowledge in a certain type of software, for example, but because their qualifications, their paper qualifications don't match up to that, slightly old-fashioned wooden systems, immigration systems, just go, no, you're not qualified on paper in our world for that job, so no, we're not going to give you the relevant permits. And that's, from my perspective, that's what needs to change massively. I know that such a thing exists in Russia, Czech Republic, but in other countries in our region, everybody's treated, and Indians are treated as third world citizens, incorrectly in my view.
Indeed, yeah. So, shall we go on to the different
Next,
Work
next
permits
topic.
and
Absolutely. The topic we just came up with the question, where is the Blue Card initiative going? I just picked like a couple of basic criteria and benefits that the Blue Card was supposed to bring to migrant workers coming into the European Union. And initially, I guess it was like an interesting concept that the entire region wanted to implement. And as we are European Union, we are one labor market. We're supposed to have this unified support as like a process across all the jurisdictions. But what in fact happened, perhaps I would ask my colleagues to comment from your perspective, like how did the EU Blue Card work in your country? Like, did it make it easier? I have my views and I'll share them with you in a minute, but I would be curious to hear from the audience as well. How do you feel this helped highly skilled migrants, because that was the focus on highly skilled migrants as well. Did it help them or it actually hasn't?
I had to ask what it is. I didn't know what, I'd heard of it, and I'd heard of something called Van der Elst, which apparently is yeah, exactly. And it didn't get to beyond the former Iron Curtain. We don't have it. We're now going through a unified permit. So the old work and residence permit is slowly but surely being replaced by a unified permit, and it's being used as a vehicle to make the process more complicated, longer timelines in many cases, not in all, than to make it simpler, as was, I presume, the original goal. So actually it's being used as a barrier to hiring non-EU, non-EEA employees rather than making it more simple.
that is certainly the case in Belgium, where the minimum wage to be able to have a blue card is higher than for a highly skilled person. You still have to renew it after 1 year. No, 13 months instead of 12. It's very complicated. It takes 6 months to get it, whereas a normal work permit takes 1 week. So why would anybody in Belgium bother to do it? But if I'm not mistaken, there are countries where it works better than the local work permit. Annabelle Esprit, I think you're from France, and if I'm not mistaken, you told me that you do blue cards in your country. Is there a mic for France?
You just put your hand up and I'll clock you.
Hello, my name is Annabelle from Itama Mobility, and we are in France. We are handling a lot of European blue card, and actually in France, I think this is really an exception. This time we can say that it worked quite well for highly skilled people. We were talking this morning with someone from Germany, and then I realized that the conditions in Germany are really, really more strict than in France, where the process is treated in priority in regard to local hire process. It's true what you say, Anita, that the salary is still the first step you have to, the first criteria you have to meet for this process. But after that, the French administration locally in the field, they are not that demanding for the other criteria of either the diploma or the experience. They are asking one or the other. And for the diploma at the beginning, we were really asking how we can prove, because in the law, the European law says we have to prove that the diploma, the foreign diploma, is equivalent to a 3 years degree in France. How should we prove that? How can you prove the equivalence? So we were thinking that maybe we would have to go through a very complicated process, like an extra process to certify the diploma, and then we tried without that. And in fact, the administration, they are accepting diploma with additional attestation we make from the university. But this is quite easy, and I'm very surprised that the local administration, they are not asking for a real experience additionally to the diploma of the assignee to get this kind of work permit. So in the fact, you can either have the 3 years diploma or the 5 years experience, which is again something quite very subjective. It's 5 years for the same level of responsibility. How do you judge that? It's very complicated. But in the fact, so far, we never had a blue card refused, and it is a process going quite fast. The resident permit is granted for 3 years, so it's quite an advantage for a foreign citizen, and the spouse can work. So far, it is really the first process that is that employers are aiming to when they want to hire a foreign citizen.
Yeah. Unfortunately, from what I've heard from the other European countries, even if it's easy to, or easier to obtain the blue card in France than a regular work permit, you cannot just go with that French blue card to Germany or to the next European country. And I thought that was the initial idea behind a European work and residence permit combined?
That's right. So it was supposed to be much easier to mobilize yourself between different European countries. That's why it's EU blue card. So it's very specific, but every country still has their own regulations. They still have the requirements, and like you rightly said, like there's a process of equivalency. So which equivalency process should they apply if they go to France or they go to Italy? An equivalency process may take forever. It can take even, I would say, 6 to 12 months, perhaps in certain jurisdictions. So how do you get your employees, especially when we deal with the corporate clients, and we all mainly deal with corporate clients, perhaps it's not so common that you get an individual who wants to get the permit. Even if he does, he needs to have an employer who will support this type of application. So it's not an individual application. And corporate client will not wait a year for the candidate to get this particular permit. They would have to be really, really highly skilled and highly desired to put this much effort into obtaining the card. And to be honest, the way it is working right now, it's not as it was designed. But as I understand, the European Union is still looking at the development of the EU blue card. Whether this will develop is perhaps a big question, just because every country still has own restrictions. So which salary level we should apply, the one which is in Belgium, or the one which is in France, or perhaps the one which is in Bulgaria? So if we apply the one which is in Bulgaria, will the French government be happy with this level of pay? There's a lot of questions which perhaps at the European Union level they still haven't found the answer to, and perhaps that's the reason still why EU blue card doesn't work the way it was initially designed.
Well, this actually links back into our original question, but in a different way, because if there were a unified blue card system and somebody gets in via Bulgaria, sorry, I apologize to, I don't know if Anita's in the room, but I apologize for using Bulgaria as an example, but if somebody were to get in via Bulgaria or Hungary, and then that gave them the right to work throughout the European Union, then we have a political question: how well is each individual government from the 28 protecting the entire union? And the answer will be not necessarily to the way that maybe France or Germany would like, and therefore, and there will be people trying to use a country like Hungary or Bulgaria as a springboard to get to a more a wealthier part of the European Union. It happens right down to the refugee level. We've seen 30,000 refugees coming into Hungary. Trust me, most of those people do not want to settle in Hungary. Sorry.
Do I see another question there?
Yeah.
I was going to add to Bulgaria. We also work in Bulgaria, and there we have taken advantage of the blue card, because what happens there is if you want to hire a non-European person, you have to have the quota. You have to have 10 Bulgarians working for one international non-EU to be allowed to enter. But if you have the blue card, it doesn't apply. So there it does work. But it takes a long time. So what you can do then is use countries like France, which are faster, which are quicker, start there, and then transfer the blue card to another country. And this is the loophole we've been using.
So I guess it will come down to the particular country, how they implement it, but it still feels that blue card is implemented on the country level, not on the European Union level. So still every country has their rules and regulations, how they want to utilize this type of permit.
A recent problem that we've experienced with a couple of blue card holders coming from other European member states, you know, where the card was issued, high-skilled non-Europeans who were then living in a country on projects for 9 months, 10 months, a year, so, and then being transferred to another European country, being Belgium, where I am. You know, these people also had residency permits which were connected to the blue card, and they would expire at the end of the blue card. If the transition was not made before the residency permit was expired, they were not allowed to work in Belgium because the blue card was no longer valid and they had no means to come into the Belgian territory. So, you know, we really were facing great difficulties to make sure that within a very short breaching period that we could start procedures, have the blue card accepted with all the information that was connected to it, and make sure that they were in line for an application for a Belgian residency permit. If that doesn't work out, they are being sent abroad again.
Yeah.
So that's another loop in the system which is not correct. You know, because going from one country to the next and not having a residency permit somewhere connected to Europe doesn't allow you to go into another territory.
That's right.
And I think we also noticed that the new European countries don't really know the blue card. What about Switzerland?
Well, that's what I'm the ugly duckling here on that panel. Switzerland is not part of the EU, and certainly not from an immigration point of view. And the problem is that it seems to us that many people don't realize that. We take care of almost as many corrective work and residence permit as new work and residence permit. And by corrective, I mean people that have been in Switzerland for weeks, sometimes months, and that have been working there illegally, because many European companies think that sending someone to Switzerland, well, we have bilateral agreement and the Swiss can come and work in our EU countries, so if we're European, if we have a European passport, we can just go and work in Switzerland. Yes, you will get automatically a work and residence permit in Switzerland, but you need to apply for it before you arrive. And you still need that paper. So it's just don't assume that it will be automatic. And the problem with things like the blue card or general initiative is that it makes it even less clear for EU country to realize that Switzerland is not part of it, and it's even more different. Yeah. So we see a lot of problem there. The third country national, which what we call third country national, which are non-European, in general, everything goes smoothly, it's a long process, etc. But we have a real problem with European workers that come to Switzerland and in reality are illegals in Switzerland, working illegally.
So much for Europe.
And we could perhaps keep talking about the blue card and its successes and failures for hours. But moving on to perhaps another interesting aspect of migration within Europe, which I find interesting, like when you look at the demographics, and we start looking at how Europe is aging, and it becomes perhaps a new topic on the subject, and what do countries do about it, and like how are they going to manage this? Like what are the solutions? Is there a solution without migration? Perhaps like that's the question to the audience. Like how do you see this happening in your countries on the discussion panels? Or
so from this map, it shows that Germany and Italy seem to be in kind of a problem. Klaus, do you have experience with that?
Exactly.
What is your experience with that, Klaus? Klaus Kramer's Palladium? Micro.
Here, in front.
Mike?
Put your
Just
hand up,
here,
Klaus.
just front here.
Back, I go to the back or at the front.
We keep you fit, Francis.
Yeah, we see that the people who are working and contributing to the social security system, there are less and less people, and the people are going to retirement, they are younger. although the government tries to raise the threshold to 67 years from 65 years, but there are still some people who can sneak out of that, and they go and they leave with 63 years, and there are not enough young people following them and contributing to the social security system. So we will have a severe problem in Germany to pay the pension to the people who get money from the pension funds earlier and who stay on the pension funds payroll longer until 75, 80, 90 years. And that's really a challenge for Germany. And on the other hand, we see that the government is trying to block the foreigners to come in. They are raising the bars for that. They just changed that people have to have a university degree that is accredited, that is equivalent to the German university degree. And in the beginning, they started with, okay, the university must be accredited. Now it is the university and the degree that has to be accredited. And so it is getting more and more difficult, and we will be running into a severe problem over the years.
Yeah. So on one hand, the people are getting older, they want to retire earlier, and on top of that, you're going to restrict the new, young, bright people
Fresh
to come into the
blood to
country.
come in
I think you are in deep trouble.
and
Is there anybody from Italy in the room who can give the Italian point of view with a very dark red color on the map? No Italians today? Okay. Yeah.
There we are.
Wait.
We are having the same problems in Italy. Well, everybody knows, and we do not have young people entering in the market. We have even the government is doing everything to keep things still, because Italy is, I would say, well known to be not very proactive. Italy reacts.
Reactive.
So every change, everything that happens needs time, because we have to understand how things go, how things will go. And despite this, I have to say another thing. The EU Blue Card is going great in Italy. Yes, this is a suggestion. If anybody needs to have employees coming, skilled employees coming to Italy, that's great. That's the best path. Even there, I would say Italy is quite different, because depending on the city where the employee is working or will work, it may differ sensitively. But so I would say that under this perspective, it's really sad and bad. So, but I think that with the new government, things will change. It looks like, but we have got a lot of hope. We've got faith.
Important. Speriamo in Dio. Speriamo in Dio. I'm going into adult diapers in France and in Italy. Business opportunity.
Perfect. Yes.
I'm coming.
Thank you. I'm June Ranson from New Zealand. And I'm also the chairman for the immigration industry for New Zealand, and I'm the Relocate partner. I think we can solve your problems. You need to be looking a bit further afield. Our country does need skilled people. We need investors. And the people with qualifications, your universities that they have been attained at, if they are not meeting our classifications, we have a qualifications authority, and they do in fact investigate this. With regard to investment monies, providing the level of which they may come in at, people can get residence straight off. But I emphasise we do need skilled workers in our country, covering all fields, and especially when we lost at one of our major cities in New Zealand, Christchurch. We have a huge rebuild going on. So we cover everything from technology. Our government very much provides incentive for people coming into the technology industry. And we have companies like Lockheed and all of the big IT organizations that want to come to us because we are true entrepreneurs. The Americans, for example, come to New Zealand to buy up these companies, to buy this technology. Look, we lead the world in the banking side of things. We were the ones that were far more advanced. We were the ones that developed the jet boat. And New Zealand goes on and on and on with regards to its technology. We're also a very safe haven. We're a long way away from the major issues, but saying this, the major threat of today of ISIS is very, very real, and therefore we do have strict scrutiny placed on people from certain destinations. So don't forget New Zealand, we're a great place.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the invitation.
New Zealand Tourist Board, yeah.
Yeah. You may have a problem after this massive invitation. Next year we'll see what it brought to your country. And in fact, one of your next slides is also about the problems that we experience in the new migrations, the same-sex couples, the newly composed couples, father with a couple of children, mother with a couple of other children. Is that also okay for New Zealand? Just in case.
When people come in and they actually get work visas, the principal applicant, the trailing spouse, be it a partner or husband or wife, does in fact get an open work visa. The children will of course get student visas, and it does in fact put them on a pathway. But once again, for them to continue on towards residence, their profession, once again, it complies with all the things you've talked about with regard to labour market checks. That all occurs, but they can, we have a point system, and they can in fact progress through to New Zealand residents.
Perfect, thank you. Great.
I'll just mention that it's God's own country. It's not only safe, they've got the best cricket team, the best rugby team, and the best sports teams. Okay.
More reasons to go there.
Absolutely. So yes, we moved on to
the back.
Hang on.
Hi, I'm Maddalena from Italy, and I have a question regarding S1 EU form. S1, which is known to European people, is a document attesting that because you are paying social contributions in another EU member state, you have the right to get registered, for example, with the healthcare public system. For some reason, it seems that this S1 form is it's difficult to be collected, and it varies country to country. For example, from the UK, it's something that is extremely difficult to get. Many people, and even when we talk to immigration consultants in other countries, sometimes they don't even know what it's about. You have it in Switzerland as well. And for example, from Switzerland, people coming from there, it doesn't depend on the nationality, it depends on where your payroll is and where your employer is. So as long as you pay social contributions in that country, even if you are a non-EU national, but if you are coming from working or you are seconded from EU member state, you have to bring over this S1. And why there are so many countries apparently in Europe which seems not to be aware of this form. Germany also is another country. When we say we need your S1 form, they don't know what we are talking about.
I think that's mainly because sometimes it's called an A1. That's right. Just to spread some confusion. S1, A1, yeah, and all the...
A1 and S1 are two completely different documents. A1 is the one which is typically exchanged between the home company and the host company. S1 is belonging to the assignees. It's something that the employees has to apply for. And it's completely, it's formerly it was the E106 and E101. Now they are
They
A1
change
and
name
S1.
too. Yes, indeed, they do change name. In Belgium, all you need is an A1. They never ask for the S1. But intra-European questions, Kasia?
Well, that's perhaps the issue across the board. Although, being an immigration expert, we're trying to stay away from social security matters. Which is a safer way to not to get too engaged, because you have one area of the focus, I would say, and immigration is already complicated enough to make sure that we ensure the full compliance to our corporate clients. And social security sphere is another monster to take, I would say, and I do believe that all our corporate clients engage the specialists on the social security side who should be able to resolve this type of questions, and I would leave it in their hands more than I would get myself engaged into resolving, obtaining appropriate coverage. They have it covered anyway. The only issue is they need to obtain it, so they need to be able to speak to the appropriate social security institution to obtain the document, whether it's S1 or they name it in their country slightly differently. I perhaps presume, dealing with so many different jurisdictions, what happens is a local government names it slightly differently for their own reasons, whatever they want to do with that. You call it S1, they added extra name, which is in their local language, which they name it as normally a type of document, and then it gets lost in translation. We get the Chinese whisper across entire Europe.
Okay, so no more social security questions.
No, it's social
Andrea, careful.
No, I'm not going to be polemic because this is immigration anyway. So I have a question about Brazilian companies investing in Europe. And from the top of my mind, I can tell you that France and Italy have special treaties for taxation and social when they do the, what would you call it? When you transfer.
Yes.
Totalization,
certificate of coverage.
Yes. So my question is, for how long can they do it? Right, both social and taxation. And if there is in Europe other countries that benefit Brazilian investors? I mean, expats too.
That's a very
Switzerland.
The COC.
COC, yes.
COC.
So I think that many countries may have treaty. I don't know taxes, and so I won't be able to comment on taxes, and my knowledge on social security will be limited. But I can tell you that there's many countries that we deal with which will accept the certificate of coverage. Every country will have slightly different policies, and perhaps specialists are sitting in this room who would be able to answer this question perhaps better than I do. But for example, I give you Spain as another country which has multiple treaties, not only perhaps with Brazil, but with the United States, with many other outside of Europe countries where certificate of coverage is applicable, but it's also limited for a certain period of time. So for example, with US, you have for up to 5 years. After the 5th year, you do have to change how you cover the person under the system. So not being a social security specialist, that's my vague understanding on that topic.
Okay. To come back to these particularly difficult immigration cases, Stuart, do you have an experience with people who had a partnership in the UK that wasn't accepted in Hungary, for example?
Sure. I've encouraged more people to marry in the last couple of years. Sometimes successfully. I do have a disclaimer that I make them sign. But joking aside, this is a fact, not just relating to Hungary, but other countries in our region, that civil partnerships are increasingly recognized, but it's quite hard to prove, particularly across borders. You know, you're saying, you're being asked to prove that you've been cohabiting for the past 3 years. Well, how do you do that? I mean, if you're lucky, you've got like gas bills in one partner's name, electricity bills in the other, but that's often not the case. There are ways around it. Some countries have what's called an other type a residence permit. You can also, as the assignee, you can claim that you're going to claim for a dependent spouse, dependent who is not your spouse. Yes, we've had same-sex couples as well. Oh, so far, happily, only EU. I don't know how we would cope with that if it was a non-EU partnership, but it is, I believe, at least recognized the concept that you can have a non-married dependent that you would like to look after. We've had a lady recently who wants to adopt a child from outside the European Union, and how there were some challenges related to that, but we seem to be finding solutions.
Mm-hmm. So in the end, it turned out all right.
Michelle's
you
waving.
Have another example, Michelle?
I just have a response. Just wait a little bit, because although the people in front can hear, usually the people behind cannot.
Just a response to that, send them to Denmark. Very easy to get married in Denmark. You just show your passport, you make an appointment at the city hall, and show up on the day they marry you. Apparently, a lot of people from Germany come on a holiday to get married in Denmark, and they recognize same-sex marriages as well. So
this session does sound like it's turning slightly into a sales pitch, from which is fine.
How easy is it to get married in New Zealand? Yeah. How easy is it to get divorced?
I just want to comment. I'm in Luxembourg, and in fact, this is a message that I really have for the big RMCs and for the HRs in general. Very often we get a relocation form or a questionnaire, and all those little personal information is not mentioned on it. And then we have, as the DSPs or the immigration help, we have the biggest issues with responding or with finding out that it will be delayed because, for example, they are paxed in Holland, they're coming over, the pax needs to be redone in Luxembourg or needs to be retranslated. And this is a message that I really have to all the partners, DSPs or RMCs, is to be complete and to be indiscreet in asking, have you ever been married? Have you been divorced? Are you a widow? Are the kids your own? Excuse me for asking. Eventually, is the partner okay? Because we've had the civil marriage between men, for example, or women, has only been accepted in Luxembourg because our prime minister is one. He just voted. That was his first thing in January, you see. So adoption as well. Are those really your kids? And this is information that we're hacking and that is really retaining, and we lose a lot of periods and weeks in gathering it, and then it's our fault because we're not quick. And I think if we get that information beforehand, or an EU married to a non-EU, just that simple thing, she needs a residency permit, or depending, even Social Security. Kasia, I just wanted to tell you that for Social Security, in Luxembourg it is a must to show that you have health coverage. If you don't put that in your application, they will return your application. So it's a message in general, even with all the partners here, you can be indiscreet in asking because it saves time and money.
Absolutely.
I'd like to be around when you sensitively ask, are those really your kids? That would take some management. Chairman, I remind you that it's 2:45. You asked me to give you a time check. We've time enough, but it's 1:45.
1:45. So to round it off, I think Kasia would love to hear what you think about the topic of how it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, how is it today, and how would you like it to be in the future? Right? That was one of your questions that you would really like a few answers on.
That's why we're rushing off to the last slide of the presentation and putting different areas perhaps out there for your consideration. So I have been in this industry for over 12 years now, observing how things have changed. And the focus of this perhaps slide is more on services, not immigration itself, in strict terms, what the governments do to change the immigration. I'm curious, how do you see see the trend is moving from the time when you started working in this business, when you were focusing on obtaining a permit for the corporation, for the individual, in those different areas which I have listed on this slide, such as like what types of assignments have you dealt with? What kind of support was offered to those individuals? What clients were expecting from you in the terms of the legal knowledge? How in-depth questions were they asking from you? What was the communication expectation, and how quickly they needed this information? How quickly the case was progressing? What technology you used before? What do you use now? What do you think it will be in the future? And what kind of outsourcing have you noticed we have in place in terms of acquiring the clients? Where your clients mainly come from? What are the types of corporate clients that you are dealing with? And what's the approach to compliance? So I will be like putting one by one and give it to you for the thought in the meantime. What were my thoughts on those areas? But perhaps I would give it also out there if you agree or disagree with this comment.
Thank you. Ivona from Baerlocher in Slovakia. Maybe just a brief comment as per where I see what's been happening in our industry. I originally started a company as a relocation services provider, and we were doing immigration as a favor for our customers. It's no longer the truth. Immigration is 70% of what we do right now. Where I see a main difference in the past and now, and I think that's where we're going actually, we were selling immigration services. That's how we created the scopes, that's why we priced it, and that's how we deliver it. It was mostly some paper pushing, some paper writing, some legwork. Now we continue selling immigration services in our minds, where I think we're still in history, but we are actually expected to deliver immigration compliance. I'm not certain if this is the case in your countries, in your companies, but I feel that we've come a long way, and we continue delivering service for a price that is no longer compatible what we're asked to deliver. Yep. So I didn't need an immigration lawyer, and it doesn't exist in our companies. Actually, in our country legal system, it doesn't exist. Now I need that lawyer. So that's maybe our challenge I see. Maybe some of you agree, maybe not. But
Can I agree on that one? Okay, I mean, Ivonka, I couldn't agree more. You know, what was going on in the past, it was long-term assignees, you were typically dealing with local HR, it was all in the local language, it was easy, it was done mostly by telephone, there wasn't a lot of backup, and for the most part, it worked, it was very easy. It was low compliance, and the liability aspect. You were not being held responsible for. You're responsible for your administration. If you fill the form in wrong and the person doesn't get their permits, it's your fault. But in terms of legally, should that person be on payroll at this stage, we would give advice. Whether you take that advice or not, that's up to you, but we were not responsible for it. The expectation now is completely different. I mean, our indemnity insurance policy, which allows for negligent acts, most of that, in my view, is there for the immigration side. That's where I have the biggest fear, and it's the only time I've ever had a client company turn around to us and said, we took somebody off payroll because of your consultancy. And I said, no, my advice. And they actually challenged us and said, right, you owe us 2 months' salary for the person while they were off payroll, 2 months' salary for the person that had to replace them. So we had to go and ask the government for clarification on the law. We got that in writing, which, by the way, even the government said it was just their opinion. And they said, it's open to reinterpretation, and if you want, we'll go to court and we'll see if you agree, if the court agrees with us. But we then had to defend ourselves, and that was a first for us. It was quite scary. We were right, by the way.
Luckily. But you went already diagonally through all the points that Kasia was listing.
Sorry about that.
No, you
But
just did
that's
the
okay,
perfect
that's
job.
perfect,
You did a perfect
yes.
job.
Sylvie had I don't know, Sylvie, did you want to ask a question?
Wait.
Wait for the mic.
I think today we also need to more educate our customers because they want them for today or yesterday, and we haven't even got the paperwork. So that's one big thing. And sometimes they think because they're coming from this or this country, they can start immediately. So even with the blue cards. On the other thing, I think our job and our role today is also to go more to immigration specialists and to go more to immigration ministries and explain what the cases are, because we have just recently in our country we've been to immigration and we've created a new work permit. Even above the blue card, you see, because of the advice and because we see so many IT people and research people coming in, there was really a big need. From an economy standpoint, it will still stay, I think, even if we are in Europe, a very European standpoint, because a lot is linked on the salary.
And I'm sure that's true for all the countries represented here. To round it off, these are a lot of things to think about, and please give us as much feedback as possible. You will have these presentations online soon, and if we can build on a more detailed or a more experience-based study for next year, just like the presentation this morning about cross-cultural studies that Barbara Gibson did, that would be wonderful. So please give us as much information about your personal experiences with immigration. Sorry?
We have one more question.
One more, because we're starving.
On the side, hello, my name is Anita Nielsen. I'm from Stuart Partner, also one of those from Switzerland, which is in the middle of the Europe, but often overlooked as we're not part of the big blue. I just quickly wanted to say, as Sabine rightly said, underestimated, largely underestimated for those who are coming to Switzerland on assignment. Agree with having to educate your client, who very often really honestly doesn't know what the implications can be sending in people without. We have gone along with technology, so we now have a program allowing the clients to see it 24/7, because we feel a pressure to always have the answer right away. It has to be quicker, it has to be certain. And the one point that I just wanted to make is that at the moment where everybody says global mobility is going to increase, funny enough, the countries are going the other direction. They're saying we're going to limit immigration, we're going to have a bigger hold on immigration. Very much the case in Switzerland in the last year and this year with reduced permit quotas. And there, our experience is the clients very often want us to be their crystal ball. Not just what is going on now or tomorrow. They will want to know in half a year's time what are the authorities going to be using as criteria to deal with the situation that they now have less quota but are not told exactly by the government, by the federal authorities, how to implement it. And that for us is very tricky. We already have spent a lot of time explaining why the person they're sending in today needs different criteria than the guy they sent in last year to the same country, to the same company, and being asked to predict the future in an industry where honestly every 2 weeks the authorities will let us know, oh, now we've decided instead of 2 years, we want 3 years work experience for this kind of permit, is incredibly tricky. And that is for the moment until you get another level of certainty for the next phase of immigration in Europe or around our country at least, is a huge challenge, which also requires you to have the knowledge to say, this might not be possible at the moment, but we do know ways to get as close to what it is you're asking us as possible. And the earlier the clients come to us with their plans, the less likely they are going to be disappointed by us then being the bad one saying, well, sorry, that person for there, it's not going to be possible, after they have spent so much time and money convincing the person and the company around to send him in the first place.
Thank you very much. I think we all agree. And thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Sabine. Thank you, Kasia. And thank you, Francis, for all the legwork.